Welcome to the Dungeon Talk, a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition podcast providing tutorials, inspiration, info, and interviews about aspects of Dungeons & Dragons. I'm your host, Nathaniel, and you're listening to the Dungeon Talk, episode 12, Deities and Gods. Dungeon Talk! Dungeon Talk! Dungeon Talk! Do-do-do-do! Religion is an important part of life in the worlds of the D&D multiverse. When gods walk the world, clerics channel divine power, evil cults perform dark sacrifices in subterranean layers, and shining paladins stand like beacons against the darkness. It's hard to be ambivalent about the deities and deny their existence. So you're listening to episode 12 of the Dungeon Talk, Deities and Gods. Now, deities and gods are a bit interesting, because they're fun to play around with, because there are so many different types, there are so many different gods and deities already there for you to choose and pick and choose from. What's fun to do is to go into Appendix B of the Player's Handbook and then just pick random gods from the different tables they have there and then make your own pantheon. But this episode is going to be explaining how to use deities and gods, how to create deities and gods, and creating your sort of pantheons of gods for your Dungeons & Dragons worlds. So let's get right into it. Gods and deities are powerful beings that rule over different aspects of existence. That is the general concept of gods. And there are different types of deities and gods that have different levels of power. Now you can start with, you've got yourself a divine rank. That's what they're called. You have your greater gods, your greater deities. These are like your Odins, your Zeus, your Hera, stuff like Set or Ra. Gods like those from the Egyptian, Greek, and Norse mythologies. These are your grand, most powerful gods, your rulers, the ones that control control a very large part of the pantheon or that world. Then you have your lesser deities. These are most of them are still gods, but they hold less power. They don't have as many worshippers, but they are still pretty prominent throughout the world, and most people would know who that person is, or character, or god is if you mentioned them. Your last type are quasi-deities. Now, these are a bit tricky because there are 3 types, and they still hold immense power, but they are not at the same level as any other gods. You've got yourself a demigod, which is usually the child of a god and a mortal. This is stuff like Percy Jackson, if you read the series. You then have your titans. Titans are beings created by gods that with immense power. They still don't hold as much power as a god, and if you mention them to anybody random, it's not entirely guaranteed that they know who that person is or titan is. But they still hold lots of power, and some people do know them a lot. If you are a really big D&D history buff, then and you have like a +4 to your history, you get a really good roll. You might get some bonus points, and your dungeon master will tell you what that titan is or something. And then the last type is a vestige. Now, vestige are basically old gods. They're just really old gods that have worshippers have sort of like stopped worshipping them. They're just really old and kind of forgotten. Ancient rituals can summon them back into the world for you to make deals with them, but they're still kind of just, I'm good. Sort of like, I don't know, like really, like if there's some god that got super lazy and just decided to stop working on everything, that's kind of what you're thinking for a vestige. So how do we create these pantheons and gods? I want to start with, let's say pantheons, because pantheons are a bit easier to start with. So when you're creating your grand pantheon of gods, generally it's a loose pantheon. By that means that there's just a bunch of gods, like a list of gods, neither exactly more powerful or less powerful. Like they'll probably have relationships in some form. Like they might have some sisters and brothers, or maybe one is a father, etc., etc. Simple stuff like that. Other versions of pantheons are like tight pantheons, and these are what you find in Greek and Norse mythology especially, where like Odin and Zeus are like the kings of the gods and they rule over everyone. And then there's like Hera and Frigga being the queens, and then there are all their divine children beneath them, and it's a very tight ruling system. And it's kind of fun to play with those things because espionage and trickery and deception between the gods is always a fun thing and can cause lots of problems for mortals, which can be jumping points for stories in your Dungeons and Dragons worlds. Now, something you want to think of is there are more than tight and loose pantheons. There are other types of worshipping systems and religions. So there's a list of them in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but I'm going to go over them briefly. You've got monotheistic. This is like Christian. This is the Christian religious system where they worship the one God, one being that it holds more power over that holds all the power rather than several gods. You've got dualism, which is an interesting one. It's about sort of a black and white system where you have like you got like two opposing forces, like you've got like life and then you have death, and there are like they can be like two beings or like several beings on each side that are like fighting for power. I guess you could call this like the seven deadly sins and then the seven heavenly virtues. And then the mortals sometimes they're expected to choose sides between these, and that can cause some fun conflicts on the whatever world you're in. And now the next one, I was very ignorant and made a big mistake. When I read about this one, animism, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, I thought that was a silly thing, and I was ignorant and very not nice. I met somebody eventually who was an animist, and an animist is somebody who believes that every object has a spirit or a soul. I felt really bad, and that was not nice of me. I should not have done that. So, story made short, be nice. Don't assume things are just silly, because oftentimes they're not, and then you'll feel bad for making a mean mistake. So animism is it's not really worship. It's just the idea that every object has a soul, and you should treat them like they are people. Not entirely, because that would be weird. Like, you shouldn't talk to a piece of paper, but you should treat them as if they have souls. Like, you shouldn't like treat them badly. You should treat your objects nicely. And it's actually a little bit deeper if you think into it, other than what I did and made the bad mistake I did. So the last one is forces and philosophies. This one kind of is done in the Eberron campaign setting, but it's the idea that there are more like forces and philosophies, like rather than the gods themselves ruling over those forces and philosophies. It's just the concept of I worship death, or I worship life, or I worship peace, or I worship the sky, that kind of thing, rather than worshiping a being who rules over those. So now you want to choose. You can choose one of these types of pantheons or worshiping religious systems for your world. Try different ones. Sorry, voice crack. Try different ones for your different worlds, because you can find things that you previously might not have thought would be interesting, like animism for me. I will probably do that to make up for it and make a world that has an animist religion, sort of. So that's the kind of thing. So you think of different ways you could use these pantheons. I traditionally use tight pantheons because that way you can do a sort of like, I guess, Game of Thrones style thing and have like lots of betrayal and twists within the pantheon, and not like secret alliances and stuff, because those are always fun. Sort of like how in the first Percy Jackson book, Thor and Poseidon were not getting along, and they thought that Zeus thought Poseidon had stolen his thunderbolt. Thor Zeus thought Poseidon stole his thunderbolt, but he didn't, and I'm not going to spoil what happens because that's the basic premise of the book is all I'll give away. And it's fun to have sort of like twists and deception and trickery, because then you can have like cool mysteries, and then divine mysteries are very fun for your players, because players having to interact with divine mysteries is very difficult because they are mere mortals, while these are gods who are playing around and having their fun little games. So now let's go into the idea of creating your own gods. So if you're creating one god, you want to sort of make them very prominent, obviously, and they have to be the one who controls everything, or sort of not, or sort of like they want to be. They have to have some way, system or way that they are hold more power than everybody else, and it's the reason they are worshipped over any other deity, and it's a monotheistic, and that's why it's a monotheistic religion. Something fun to do is maybe there are many different religions in your world. Something Eberron does is that they have several different pantheons. Like they have like the Silver Flame, and then there's like the Dark Six. There are different pantheons of gods and beings to worship. So when you're creating gods, think of a couple of things you want to keep note, like what is their alignment, and then what are their domains. Now, this is alignment is very helpful because then you can find out just basic information on what they do in certain situations. But then you also want to think of domains. Now, domains are a cleric thing. Clerics have subclasses called domains, depending on what deity or god they worship, or philosophy even. So if they are worship Thor, they might have the Tempest domain, which is like storms and thunder and stuff. Maybe if they worshipped Hephaestus, they might have the Forge domain, which is like fire and forging and weapons and stuff. So you just want to think of like a couple domains. So like, let's say I'm going to make a god. I'm going to make a female trickster god. Then you might want to put in the trickster domain because that's pretty self-explanatory. They are a mischievous god, or like Loki and kind of style thing. Then you want to kind of think of what other than domains, what do they actually rule over in specific? Like if I were to make, because Hephaestus is the god of like creation and forging machines and stuff. I would choose a forge domain because that's just the general system. But if I were to be doing something more specific to be what this god rules over, so let's keep going with our trickster god. Say they are the god of pranks, and they love playing jokes and tricks on their friends, family, etc. Now you want to think. So now that we have what they're a god of, so this is a goddess because it's a she. So this goddess is ruling over pranks and jokes. Their alignment, let's say, is chaotic good, and their domain is the trickster domain. There we go. Now you want to keep going because gods are this kind of thing you want to keep very You want to in the terms of like we're creating an NPC. These gods are technically an NPC, but you don't want to write a stat block before them because that would be dumb. They can basically do whatever. So don't even think about it. So you then want to, because you want to go very deep in this, because if you have a player who is a cleric or a warlock or something that is worshiping this deity, you want to be very careful because there's a lot of like spells that do like divine intervention or commune, where they can talk to these gods and ask questions and stuff. And you also want to be very particular on how their deity responds. Some deities might just like will like say, yeah, sure, you have to just take a right and then take a left and then straight on toward until you get to the big oak tree, then take a right. Or maybe they say, or it's like a nature god, and then a calm breeze points in the direction they need to go. Different personalities or even responses, because gods are very busy. They're very powerful beings. They have to control an entire aspect of existence. So they don't always have the time to respond with personal messages to everybody. They usually let it go to automated voicemail. So that's why you want to think of how would they respond. Now you also want to think of what's their perception in this world. How are they perceived by the general public? if it's something like Loki, they're like, oh, that's the god of trickery and deception. He's a bad guy. We shouldn't like him. Or maybe so if we're talking about our trickster god, this trickster goddess, oh, she's a goddess of pranks. How about like lots of younger kids will worship are fans of her and will give like several prayers when they're trying to trick other people. Things like that. You also want to think of what are their ideals and commandments. What do they want from their worshippers? What do they want for the world? What are their beliefs? What do they believe in? So let's say for this trickster god, how about their commandment is have some fun, be good, uh, never destroy anything, but never destroy. Just have some fun. And this makes this goddess a somebody who is very well perceived because they're not like destroy everything and have crazy pranks that blow everything up. Have just silly fun pranks and be kind. So that's kind of a good way to conceptualize this character. Something you can do. It's totally up to you, but you want to think of what is their holy symbol? Holy symbols are usually they're a player design thing because different players will have different holy symbols. Holy symbols are the kind of spellcasting focus that clerics and paladins use that focus like divine energy. So it's fun to like if you're an artsy person, you can totally go ahead and like create your very own holy symbol for your god or goddess. But if you're not a totally artsy person, go ahead, go to Google, find a picture. I do that all the time and just like copy and paste a picture and then bam, bing bang boom, you've got it. So holy symbols can help like what their general symbol is, and then the players can sort of take that and shift it to however they would like. Sort of like say, all right, so let's keep going with our trickster goddess. Say her holy symbol is a let's say it's a music box. I don't know, that's a music box with like a jack in the box kind of thing. And then it's sort of like it's embedded in crystal. So then the players can go ahead and take this idea, like it's a jack in the box made of crystal, and then they can shape it however they want. Maybe it's a carving in a stone that they have, or a necklace, or an amulet, or maybe they have a special warhammer that has a jewel that has the holy symbol of this goddess inside of it, embedded into it. And these are the kinds of things, because something I do want to tell you, weapons cannot be holy symbols, but a way to get around this is you can just place the holy symbol into the weapon, and then you have the weapon as a holy symbol, so it's not that big a deal. You also want to think of a couple more things. What's the relationship between the humanoids or the beings of this world and their gods? What's the relationship? How does it influence their culture and actions? Many gods and goddesses in the Forgotten Realms, even if they're not directly worshipped by one person, this person may be like going on a fishing trip, and they may be a huge worshiper of the nature god, but they're going to send a quick prayer to the sea god to make sure that they have safe fishing travels. I don't know, something like that. You also want to think of what is their sometimes relationships don't always go the right way. Maybe there's a bad breakup, or maybe something that's fun to play around with it are Aasimar. Aasimar are beings that are sort of like taken out of they're servants of the gods, and sometimes they feel like they're sort of like fallen angels, but sometimes they feel like the gods abandoned them, or maybe they're still fully worshiping of the gods or in tune with the gods, and they're like, yeah, I'm still helping them. I don't know, I'm just coming up with a silly high-pitched voice. So that kind of thing. Sometimes this heavily influences cultures too. Having a very prominent symbol of in their culture, like maybe there's this really powerful sun god that helps this farming village with their crops. They might very strongly revere this sun god, or maybe it's they're in a desert and they need water, so they really revere this rain god. So things like that, and maybe even it's a more a more severe situation, like they have a volcano village or a city or something, and they have to pray to the volcano god, or maybe make sacrifices to make sure that this volcano god does not blow up their entire village. So stuff like that can be fun to play with. Another thing is religious followings. This is probably the last thing of this episode. Religious followings are kind of so what is the sort of religious following? How do people worship? What kind of worship in the world is there? There's probably, you're going to think of the basic thing is like people might go to a church or something. And there might be like a priest or a pastor there. There's also like clerics and paladins who go out and spread the power, and they're divine warriors and healers for their god or deity. And then, of course, there are acolytes who devote part of their life to working for this god. Or maybe there's even darker, and you get like a cult. And they revere this god so much that they do crazy crap, like killing people and feeding each other with each other. I don't know. It really depends on the situation. Maybe it's a really like dark god, and they're like, you must sacrifice one of your own. Draw some sticks or something. That kind of thing. And then, of course, you can always go even crazier and have like an eternal servant that will do everything and anything that this god or deity wants, including like jumping off a cliff. So, what do you think of this episode? This is the Deities and Gods episode. This was a fun one to come up with because I love creating deities and pantheons, and it played right into the 20-minute mark for the episode. So thanks for listening. Just a quick note, we have our brand new YouTube channel up, and you can go ahead and listen to the to all from should be I think by now when you're listening to it, there should be up episodes all the way up to episode 11. The YouTube channel will release the week after, on the Saturday of the week after of the Saturday after. I'm confusing myself. The next Saturday, so the episode will release Friday, and then you'll be able to access the episode on YouTube the Saturday the next week. So thanks for listening. Once again, thanks for listening to this episode of the Dungeon Talk. We upload weekly on Fridays and uploads weekly on Saturdays if you want to check out our brand new YouTube channel. You can also find the latest news and updates on our Instagram at The Dungeon Talk. You can go ahead and ask questions on our email, thedungeontalk@gmail.com, and you can listen basically anywhere you can get your podcast. So once again, thanks for listening. Stay nerdy, stay safe. Dungeon Talk! Dungeon Talk! Dungeon Talk! Do 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 do!